everybody? Everybody good? Hey, do me a favor, stand back up. Oh, y'all gonna awe me? I will throw something at you. So here's what we're gonna do, okay? For the next few minutes, this is what you have to do. Where are the middle school girls in the room? Let me hear from middle school girls. They're excited about being in middle school. They're not out of puberty yet. I don't know if y'all know this. But a middle school girl, why is the room on fire? A middle school girl has 88 more hormone combinations going on in her body than a woman in menopause. And if you've ever been around a woman in menopause, it's kind of like, we are men, all right? It's scary. So if you've ever wondered why, middle school girls, you need to embrace your crazy, okay? We love the fact that you're just like, ah! All right, that's awesome. Where are the middle school boys? Can you hear from middle school boys? Hey, here's what's awesome about middle school boys. Middle school boys only, let me hear you yell. Now listen, high school boys. Puberty. All right, so where are the high school girls? High school girls, anybody excited to be in high school? No, we are so cool, we're not going to fail her. Are there any high school seniors? You're about to graduate. Yeah, excited. So here's what we're going to do. Listen, for the next few minutes, I want you to walk up to someone of the opposite sex. Hold on. That's the same sex, all right? Now listen, someone of the opposite sex, I want you to look them in the eye. I want you to smile. I want you to extend your hand. Everybody listen. Extend your hand. I would like for you to introduce yourself to them. Tell them your name. Ask them one question to get to know them. And then say, it's nice to meet you. And move on to someone else. And you have to meet as many people in the room as you can. On your mark, get set, go! Hey, I'm Stuart. What's your name? Autumn? What's your favorite thing in the world to do? Are you good? It's so good to meet you. Hey, I'm Stuart. Hey, good to meet you. What's your favorite thing in the world to do? Singing? You and Autumn need to get together. Good to meet you. Hey, I'm Stuart. What's your name? Hey, good to meet you. What's your favorite? That's your least favorite thing in the world. How old are you? Carson. Oh, good to meet you. Hey, I'm Stuart. Trinity, it's so good to meet you. You were so good at it. You drink coffee? You should never start. Oh, it's good to meet you. Yeah, I'm Stuart. You're dating? Baby? Oh, it's so good to meet you. Yeah, she's like, hi, I'm dating. Hey, how are you all too? Your hands are cold.
Hi, my name's Justin. Goodbye now.
Hey, how are you? What's your name? You think I would live in that? Some of y'all are not participating, and I'm going to call you out in just a second.
I hate being called out. I get called out.
You got two more minutes.
Nice to meet you. I have no idea who you are.
Once you think you've met everybody, you can sit down. Hey, did you guys don't rework it right in here? I just feel like
Hi, my name's Zane.
Good job, Trinity.
Nice to meet you, Zane.
That was like a dead fish.
Trinity ate some chocolate and she was bouncing off the wall. I asked her if she drank coffee and she's like, no, but I had some chocolate. Good job. Now, everybody pay attention. Now, there was a method to that madness, and I could tell there were some of us that were a little frustrated and irritated and didn't want to move, and you thought you were the sun and everybody should revolve around you, and we appreciate you for gracing us with your presence. But there was a reason why I wanted you to do that. Number one, I wanted to watch some of you struggle. Now listen. And the reason why I wanted to watch you struggle is not because I enjoy watching you struggle, but there is something going on in your generation and in your culture that a lot of you don't even understand or realize is happening. In 2014, all the data screamed that the average teenager in America spent about 444 minutes a day looking at some sort of screen, whether it was a smartphone, a television, or a computer. For those of you that are mathematically challenged, 444 minutes equals about 7.5 hours. Now here's what's interesting, to which most of you go, I understand that because I'm not being allowed to look at my cell phone or my smartphone while you're talking, and it's frustrating me because you're having withdrawals, because that's what you do naturally when you get bored, and I am extremely boring and I understand that, so that's why I'm going fast. But listen, here's what you don't understand. 7.5 hours a day looking at a smartphone, computer, or television, and with your smartphone, you have at a fingertip, you not only have a full-service dating service, but you have the capacity to look at pictures and images as it relates to pornography at just you deciding to swipe. But there's something worse, and that's really, really bad. Because there are young men in this room, you won't talk about it because you understand how embarrassing it is to you. But there are young men at varying ranges, and you can't stop yourself from going to those places, looking at those images and watching those videos. And then you wonder why you treat the opposite sex the way that you do. You have objectified the opposite sex simply by the images that you look at. But even that isn't as harmful as what I'm about to share. An MIT professor has reasoned that because your generation spends so much time doing this, you are losing the capacity to have a dialogue with somebody. And here's how I know it's true. I watch some of you young men who walk around like you're all that in a bucket of grease. Girls, you know that guy at your school that'll walk up to you and be like, I can bench press 500 pounds. And you want to go, that's great, I can read. You know that guy? And some of y'all are in the room and that's what you give off. You give off this sense that I'm all that in the bucket of grease, I'm swagalicious, I got it going on. And then I watched you be completely incapable of being kind, respectful, and looking a young lady in the eye and talking to her. Some of you, to be very candid, and I'm a guest, I don't have the right to say this to you personally, but I do have a microphone. Some of you were absolutely rude and disrespectful. And I don't completely pile the blame on you. You are conditioning yourself to think and to interact with the opposite sex that way. What I loved about those of you that were in middle school is that you just don't know any better. Did anybody notice that in middle school, guys and girls just walking up going, hey, how you doing? You know, they do that. But here's what happens. See, for those of you that are too cool for school, high schoolers, there was a time when you were like that middle school student. But something happened. And what happened is you think what you did is that you created your brand and who you are, when in reality, culture had already been set for you, and you just blended into something that is literally controlling the way you act, think about everybody, and especially the opposite sex. And here's how I know that your smartphone and that communication controls you. Can you throw that slide that I was talking about up on the screen? Have you ever gotten one of these? And you see the read receipt and it drives you nuts? See, some of us in this room, we've sent a text and the read receipt is there, and this is what happens. You don't get a response back. And what goes from, I'm just going to send this text to see if they want to do something, and then there's silence, and you know they've looked at it. And what you begin to do is build an entire case in your mind. If you don't think that your capacity or the smartphone is having an effect on your generation, next slide, some of you have literally, can you go to the next one? Some of you have literally asked somebody out this way. Can anybody interpret that for me, because I'm old? What is it? Hold up. My man stood up. He's excited about it. What is it saying? Don't slide back in the chair, homie. You stood up. Stand up. Tell us. Some slushies and go to the movies on Friday night. So isn't it interesting that you have the capacity, without using words, to actually ask each other out and watch, and then this is what happens when you have an opportunity to actually be in front of someone and talk to that person. You struggle. But here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to do. I want to show you the danger of your inability to just have companionship, partnership, for you to be a friend to someone, and talk to them. Because if you carry this idea out to its logical conclusion, next slide, you'll start doing things like this. My house is on fire and I'm sad. Or even worse, how many of us in this room, next slide, would love to get this text? See, and I love this. I love the fact that you guys are reacting as strongly as you are. I really do. I appreciate the fact that some of us are taking this seriously, because you're going, there's no way that I would go to a doctor who would text that kind of message to me, because can we just agree that cancer is such a private, powerful, strong thing that to get a message about cancer via text would be the most inappropriate, unkind, unprofessional, unbecoming thing in the world. If you think that about cancer, then why in the world would you send naked pictures of yourself to somebody? Why in the world, fellas, would you send inappropriate text to someone? Because can we just agree that that is just as personal, just as sensitive, and the way that God has created it, He means it to be the most incredible thing in the world that is intended between you and somebody else. But here's what you've done. You've reduced this beautiful thing to this kind of jargon. And the reason why I'm passionate about this is not because I'm mad. You're better than that. Because ask all the adults in the room that are married, and because they didn't learn how to communicate with each other, ask them how great a marriage is when you get to that point and they can't talk. Ask the married couples in the room how important it is for you to communicate with each other. Ask the young lady in the room who has been treated this way, broken up via text, how it made her feel. Am I telling the truth, ladies? There are some of you, you were treated this way. You got broken up this way and broken up with this way. And if you ever see that dude walking down the hall, isn't there something in you that just wants to You're like, I know I should love him, but I hate. You know that thing? There's something in you, and all the guys are like, hey, I'm getting out of here. Because it can switch. Now, here's my point. Everybody in the room, your pushback is, but texting and smartphone and that communication for us, that's normal. Perspectives that are normal don't necessarily mean perspectives that are best. Perspectives that are normal doesn't necessarily mean that those perspectives are best. You see life the way you see life because of the way that you think. Your mind literally establishes your capacity and how you view someone of the opposite sex. No one is more influential in your life than you are because no one talks to you more than you do. Let me say that again. No one is more influential in your life than you are because nobody talks to you more than you do. Your body, your heart, your hands, your feet, your mouth, your eyes is constantly eavesdropping on your mind. And it acts accordingly. So what that implies then, that it only makes sense that if you start correcting or changing how you think about the opposite sex, and you start establishing some really, really firm standards and convictions about the opposite sex, whether it's in how you're going to interact with them, the things you are and will not do as it relates to the physical part of things, the way that you will communicate with them and not communicate with them. But we have a rule in our house that our daughters established. If a young man will not come to the door and pick her up, if a young man is going to ask her out via text, that is an immediate sign that he is not mature enough for you to be with him. It's just that simple. That wasn't my idea, and you're going to see how they got there. And it doesn't mean that it's not difficult, but because there's been some fellas that they wanted to lower that conviction about. But here's how that happened. They started changing the way that they think. So, if that's true, then let's consider a couple things. Hopefully we've established this idea that God made you. God is not upset with you. He made you. God made sex. It's his idea. And God wants you to have an incredible sexual experience. He just simply wants you to wait. He wants you to wait. And if God is the creator and we consider that his word, the Bible, gives us incredible principles and commands for us to operate by, I want you to consider what Paul, the guy who wrote half of the New Testament, told one of his, he was mentoring this guy named Timothy. And here's what he told Timothy to tell young ladies. Young ladies, Paul told Timothy to tell young ladies to talk to younger men as you would to your own brothers. Talk to younger men, talk to guys your own age like you would your own brother. Fellas, and treat younger women with all the purity as you would your own sisters. Now, I'm not trying to be gross, and every adult in this room, I want you to hear this. I am trying to I want this to sting and gross some of you out to some degree. But every girl, look at me. If you have a little brother, you're not thinking, because can we just agree? Exactly. You went, oh. Some of you just threw up a little bit in your mouth thinking about that. If Paul's idea in how you as a young lady should talk to someone of the opposite sex is to speak to them like you would your little brother, then why in the world would you make or over-sexualize everything in conversation? Guys, none of you would talk to your sisters. Do you know what I would do to my son if he talked to his sisters the way some of you talk to the opposite sex? We would have to call an ambulance. He doesn't treat his sisters that way. And if you wouldn't talk to you wouldn't speak to your sisters that way, then why would you speak to someone that isn't your sister who's of the opposite sex that way? A different way to think. Paul told the church in Corinth this: when you sin against other believers by encouraging them to do something they think is wrong, you're sinning against Jesus. When you encourage someone that you know to do something wrong, you are sinning, you are breaking the heart of God. That's hard for us to wrestle with because a lot of us in this room, you thought it's been innocent. The flirting that goes way too far. The things that you say that goes way too far. The fact that just by the fact, fellas, that you can't look a young lady in the eye and introduce yourself and have a normal conversation with her, in many ways says that you objectify her. And vice versa. So here's what I want to help you do, and then we're going to go to this next breakout. I think this is really, really important. And if you are taking notes, I would recommend that you write this down, okay? Because here's what I think your generation needs to do more than anything else. You need to learn how to develop standards or convictions as it relates to your relationships with the opposite sex. And here's what I mean by a standard or a conviction. A standard is this thing that you decide that creates boundaries around your life. Why are standards important? First of all, standards protect your freedom. When you decide this is as far as I will go, this is what I am going to do, this is what I'm not going to do, what you do is you allow yourself to maintain some freedom in your life. Think about it like an umbrella. If it's raining outside, as long as I stay under that umbrella, I stay dry. The millisecond that I step out from under an umbrella, I'm at risk of all the elements. What a standard does is it protects you, okay? Not only does it protect your freedom, but it also protects your past. And here's where I need to be just a friend for just a second. In fact, I'm just Uncle Stuart. Everybody listen. This is really, really important. For some of you, this is hard for you to get. But if you're in high school, you can understand this. Every single one of you is going to bring a past into that relationship with the person that you wind up marrying. And here is the blessing that you have right now. You have an opportunity to make sure that that story is something that you're willing to tell. And guess how you protect that story? By establishing standards. Now, I can tell, because some of you are looking at me and you're going, well, what if I've not lived by standards and my story is already kind of messed up? How am I going to tell that? Here's what's beautiful. You develop sexual integrity in your life now. You develop relational integrity in your life now. You have a chance to patch the potholes that have been created because you decided to not live with boundaries. But here's, as someone who didn't do this, I did not follow Jesus when I was in high school, never went to church. And here's what that meant. What it meant is that when I got married and when my wife and I got married, we brought two past stories into the relationship, and we had to have conversations that some of you can't even imagine how painful they were and are. And you can't even imagine how much they still sting. Because every young lady in this room, isn't this true? What you want to be able to do more than anything else with a significant other is you want to be able to trust them. Have you ever had a guy break your trust and you want to break his neck? You know why trust is so important? Here's why trust is so important. Trust is so important because it's the currency of relationship. It's like me giving you $100,000. You have $100,000, you are rich. But here's what happens when you don't trust. It's like someone stealing $10,000, stealing another $10,000, and before you know it, you're bankrupt. When you develop standards, what you do is you protect the trust that you have in a relationship, not only for the relationship that you have now, but the relationship that you're going to have in the future. And lastly, standards protect your integrity. Standards protect this ability for what you say to be true. I'm going to push a little bit, and I know I don't know very many of you well at all. But I get the sense that there's some young men in this room, and you think this is stupid. And here's what I would guess about you. That your word holds very little weight. Because what you say and what you do are two different things. But when you develop standards, you protect your integrity. Because isn't this true, fellas? For every guy in this room, what you want more than anything else is when a young lady tells you, this is what I feel, this is what I believe, this is who we are, for you to take it into the bank that is true. And if she ever does anything to break that trust, you look at her and say, no integrity. What standards do, is they protect that. Now, here's how you develop a standard. Everybody ready? Here's how you develop a standard. You take the commands or the principles that God gives us and you apply them to wisdom. So it's a command or a principle plus wisdom. Say that with me. A command or a principle plus wisdom. Louder. A command or a principle plus wisdom. Now, here's what a command is. A command is an imperative. For example, if God tells you not to do something, this is just a helpful hint from your Uncle Stuart. If God tells you not to do something, pretty good idea that you shouldn't do it. If God tells you to do something, it's a very good idea that you should do it. Why? Because God has given you a command. Here's what's interesting. There are some of you in this room and you think the Bible is just full of all these commands. Interestingly enough, the Bible is full of more principles than it is commands. A principle is different than a command. Here's what a principle is. A principle is a cause and effect. If you do this, this is going to happen. Doesn't say that you can't do this, but if you do it, this is going to happen. For example, where we used to live, there was this really, really sharp curve, and on the other side of the curve was this giant cow pasture. And there were these, and you've seen them, there were these orange signs that had these black arrows that pointed, and the closer you got to the curve, they were more and more of those arrows, and away back from that, from the curve, there was a speed limit sign that said 55 miles an hour. As you got closer to the curve, there was a sign that said slow down. Now watch. You didn't have to slow down. Speed limit was 55 miles an hour. But the sign said slow down because the sign is a principle. If you don't slow down, this is what's going to happen. And I cannot tell you how many times after a weekend I would go around that curve and there would be a car messed up, tangled in the middle of that cow pasture. And the reason why is because someone didn't bother to slow down and they wound up jumping off the curb and landing in the middle of a cow pasture. One time, they actually hit a cow. Eat more chicken. All right, so that's what a principle is. A command or a principle plus wisdom. Now, here's where you are as a teenager, and I'm glad there are those that are listening. Here's where you are as a teenager. You do not need to feel bad about this. In fact, you should celebrate the fact that you are naive. And some of you are like, I am not naive. I have experience. You are naive. Let me tell you why you are naive. Let me tell you why you're naive. You're naive because you just haven't lived long. That's why these people that are 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old in the room, I'm sorry, I don't know if there's any 80-year-olds here, but that's why they are an advantage to you. Why? Because they've lived longer than you. Adults have been to the future. They are where you want to wind up. They are old. And by being old, they have experiences that you don't have, and consequently, they're able to provide you wisdom. Wisdom only comes from experience. Now watch. What does this have to do with the relationship? I want to give you a command. And I want you to see how you can begin to work this into building a standard as it relates to your relationship. Paul wrote the church in Corinth and said this: don't team up with those who are unbelievers. How can righteousness be a partner with wickedness? How can light live with darkness? Some of your translations may read this way: do not be unequally yoked with an unbeliever. That is a command. And the command there is do not marry someone who does not share your faith. That's the command. Everybody got it? Let me give you some wisdom. This will be really good for you to write down. Everybody look, and then you can write it down. The command is don't marry someone that's not a believer. Here's some wisdom. You run a really, really high risk, a very, very high risk of falling in love with somebody that you date. Anybody that you date, you're going to run a risk of falling in love with them. Do you want proof? Adults, how many of you in this room were in love with somebody that you didn't wind up marrying? Raise your hand. And y'all are going, two-timers, cheaters. No, guess what? They were teenagers. And he came by and had a mullet and listened to Van Halen when a Trans Am. And she had hair blown out to here like Farrah Fawcett. And he talked all this noise and they thought they were in love. But guess what happens to those adults now, teenagers? They walk down the mall at Christmas time and that former girlfriend or boyfriend comes walking down the mall. And they run to the bathroom and close the stall and have a worship service. Why? Because they're praising God they didn't marry him. Am I right, adults? Have you ever gone back to your reunion and gone, you look mature, right? You run a really, really high risk of falling in love with somebody that you date. And here's how I know that's also true. There are some high school students in the room. You never intended to fall in love with him. You never intended to fall in love with her. It was just one date. It was just one deal. It was just one movie. It was just one time. And now, some of you are so emotionally entangled in the relationship that you can't see a way out. You run a really, really high risk of falling in love with somebody that you date. And here's the second part of wisdom. Are you ready? Drum roll. You're probably going to marry somebody that you fall in love with. I know. It's unbelievable. There's Plato, Aristotle, and me. Listen, you're probably going to marry somebody that you fall in love with. Fellas, you're not going to be standing at the bottom of the aisle in the church and the dad brings your bride-to-be around the corner and you see her and go, oh no, oh God, no. Girls, you're not going to be holding on to your daddy's arm going, don't let me, daddy, don't let me. Fellas, she's not going to get to the bottom of the aisle and you're going to put the veil up and go, You know what you're going to do? You're going to probably marry somebody that you fell in love with. Now watch. If the command is don't marry somebody that doesn't share your faith, and the wisdom is you run a really, really high risk of falling in love with somebody that you date, and you're probably going to marry somebody that you fall in love with, what should your standard in dating be? Exactly. Isn't it amazing that there is a middle school girl down here in the front who goes, date somebody who shares my faith? And you know why some of you didn't answer it out loud? Because it's not your standard. Your standard, right, fellas, is she's hot. Your standard, girls, is will he talk to me? He pays me attention. He's got cool kicks. He's got incredible shoes. That's why I love him. He's got a big truck. I mean, can we just admit for just a second, what a dumb reason to date somebody. Why are you dating? He dresses cool. When you get home, look at the way your dad dresses. He's not always going to dress cool. Okay, you hush. I'm trying to talk, okay? I'm going to leave you with this. Shh. And I'm not picking on the guys, but I do think that it's your responsibility as a young man to up your game. I'm going to read you something that I sent our oldest daughter. Women are like apples on trees. The best ones, the special ones, are on the top of the tree. Men don't want to reach for the special ones because they're afraid of falling and don't want to get hurt. Instead, they simply get the rotten apples from the ground that aren't so good, that are easy. And eventually, the apples at the top think something is wrong with them, when in reality, they're amazing. They just have to wait for the right man to come along to be brave enough to climb all the way to the top because they value quality. Girls, don't ever lower yourself from the tree. Stay in the treetops. And fellas, be brave enough to climb. Because guess what, guys? Only the real ones, only the strong ones, and only the ones with integrity will climb the tree. Blessings to y'all.